It was a cold Sunday morning in Los Angeles, the kind of morning when even the sky seemed unsure whether to shine or to grieve. The pews inside the modest Baptist church on the corner of Crenshaw and 43rd were half filled with the elderly, the tired, and the quietly faithful. There were no spotlights, no cameras, no adoring crowds screaming for an encore, just whispers of prayer, the slow hum of a gospel organ, and a silence that invited reflection. Kanye West slipped in through the side door, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. No entourage, no spectacle, just him and the weight he carried on his shoulders, a weight that fame had placed there, and that silence now exposed. He wasn't there for performance. He wasn't even sure he was there for God. But something had drawn him in. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was a voice he'd been ignoring for years. He sat in the last row. The sermon had already begun. Pastor Elgin was speaking about the prodigal son. The rhythm of his voice was gentle, but firm, each word heavy like a hammer tapping on the soul. Kanye listened, but he wasn't really listening. His eyes wandered. That's when he noticed her. 2 pews ahead sat an old black woman with white braids tucked under a lavender scarf. Her hands were folded, but her fingers trembled. She wasn't crying, but something in her silence screamed louder than any song Kanye had ever written. She glanced back, not surprised to see him there. It was as if she'd been waiting. After the service, people began to leave slowly, some exchanging hugs, others heading straight for the door. Kanye remained seated. He didn't move. The woman didn't either. She turned her head slightly and said without looking at him, "You got all them riches, but you still look poor, child," she said softly. Kanye looked at her, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice cracking from the weight of her words. "I said you got the kind of wealth that should feed nations, but your eyes, they tell me you're starving for something money can't buy," she repeated gently. He looked away. "You don't know me," he replied quietly. She chuckled, not mockingly, but like a grandmother who'd heard it all before. "No, I don't know the man the world sees, but I know the soul that walked in here today," she explained. Kanye leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. "You think I'm lost, don't you?" he asked. The woman turned to him fully now, her eyes piercing and unafraid. "I think you've been running, and I think maybe today you just got tired of running," she answered. He swallowed hard. There was something about the way she said it, like she wasn't guessing, like she knew. "I've done things I'm not proud of," Kanye admitted. She nodded slowly. "We all have. Ain't no sin too big for God, son. But pride will keep you from asking him to clean it off you," she said with conviction. Kanye looked down at the worn Bible she held in her lap. Its cover was torn, pages wrinkled. That book had clearly survived more than just time. "What made you come here today?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "I woke up in a mansion and felt homeless," Kanye whispered. The woman smiled faintly. "Then maybe, child, you're finally starting to come home," she said. And with that, she stood up slowly, gripping the wooden pew for balance. She didn't say another word. She just started walking toward the exit, leaving Kanye sitting there still, stunned and shaken in a way he hadn't felt since his mother's funeral. The church doors closed behind her with a soft thud, and in that moment, Kanye realized he hadn't just come to church. He had been summoned. The ride home was silent. No music, no calls, no entourage to fill the emptiness. Just the soft hum of the city outside the tinted windows and Kanye's thoughts, which had suddenly become too loud to ignore. He sat in his massive Bel Air estate, surrounded by stone walls and designer furniture. Everything was perfect, too perfect, like a photograph no one wanted to touch. But even in all that beauty, he felt like an intruder. The woman's voice lingered in his head, not just her words, but the way she looked at him, as if she saw through the platinum, the Grammys, the arrogance. He walked to the piano room. No one was there. No one ever really was. He ran his fingers across the ivory keys but didn't play. His hands just hovered, like they had forgotten how to speak without noise. He thought back to the parties, New York, Miami, Berlin, penthouse suites filled with strangers and empty laughter. Liquor that burned more than it soothed. Models who wanted to be seen with him, not see him. Music that blasted so loud he could barely hear his own mind whispering, "Leave." It had been years of that, a fog of applause, flashing lights, after parties, and contracts. Every night he told himself he was in control, but deep down he knew something else was driving. Ego, maybe. Pain, definitely. He returned to the church the next Sunday. He wasn't even sure why. Habit? Guilt? A search for something that wouldn't fit in a song lyric? But as he stepped inside, there she was again, same pew, same scarf, same stillness. This time she saw him first. "You came back," she said calmly. "I don't know why," Kanye admitted, taking a seat beside her. "People don't come back unless they're hungry," she replied. He didn't argue. He just stared at the wooden cross above the altar and whispered, "How does it never feel enough? The money, the fame." I kept telling myself I was building something that mattered. But all I did was lose pieces of myself along the way. The woman exhaled through her nose, her eyes never leaving the altar. "Because what you built was meant to serve the world, not your soul," she said softly. Kanye looked at her, his jaw tightening. "Then why did God give me all of this if it was just gonna bury me?" he asked bitterly. She turned toward him now, slowly and deliberately, and answered without hesitation. "God didn't give you all that, child. The world did. God gave you something much harder. He gave you purpose. You just got distracted by the gifts and forgot who the giver was," she said with gravity. He leaned back, stunned. That sentence felt like a punch wrapped in a prayer. "I don't know how to find him again," Kanye admitted quietly. She nodded gently. "You don't have to find him, son. You just have to stop hiding," she replied. He blinked, unsure if she was being poetic or literal. Either way, it hit him in the chest. Then she asked the question he didn't see coming. "With all that power and money, all them parties, all those yes men around you, how did you not lose yourself completely?" she asked, looking him dead in the eye. Kanye didn't answer right away. He stared at the worn carpet under their feet, remembering the flashing lights, the shallow handshakes, the voices screaming in his ear. Finally, he spoke, slowly, with a voice more broken than boastful. "Because in the middle of all that noise, something inside me never shut up. A whisper, a hum, sometimes in the music, sometimes in the silence. It never begged, never shouted. It just stayed. And I think maybe that was God refusing to let go," he explained. She smiled gently, like she'd heard the same confession from 100 others before him. "Then you're not as far gone as you think," she said with warmth. Kanye didn't smile. He couldn't. But he did close his eyes for a moment, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was falling. It was the third Sunday in a row. The same church, the same cold morning, the same scent of old wood and hope. Kanye arrived earlier this time. No hoodie, no sunglasses, no intention to hide. He took his seat beside the woman without hesitation, as if they had been doing this every week for years. She didn't greet him at first, just looked ahead. Let the silence do its work. After a while, Kanye leaned in and whispered, "I canceled a show this week, sold out arena. I just couldn't lie to them anymore," he said. She didn't act surprised. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk off a stage that's not meant for your soul," she replied. He exhaled hard, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I used to think I was saving the culture, that if I just kept pushing boundaries, people would understand me. But now I wonder if I was just performing for an audience I didn't even respect," he confessed. The woman finally turned to face him, her eyes soft but sharp. "You were chasing applause from the same world that crucifies prophets," she said gently. Her words landed like truth usually does, slow at first, then all at once. Kanye swallowed, staring at the stained glass window that filtered the morning sun into fractured blues and reds. "I think I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if I stopped moving, I'd hear what I really am. And maybe I wouldn't like it." The woman nodded. "That fear? That's the moment just before your real voice begins," she replied. He looked at her with a kind of desperate hope. "Do you think it's too late?" he asked. She smiled. "Child, as long as you're breathing, you can still be born again," she answered with certainty. They sat in silence again, But this time it wasn't heavy. It felt full, like a seed had been planted. Then she said something unexpected. "You know, I used to be a jazz singer," she revealed, adjusting her scarf with a distant look. Kanye turned to her, intrigued. "Really? What happened?" She chuckled. "One night I was singing in a club. Crowd was on fire, drinks flowing, money in my hand. But when I got off stage, I walked past a mirror and didn't recognize the woman I'd become. That night, I walked home barefoot. Never went back," she explained. He nodded slowly, the imagery settling in his mind. "You think I can walk home too?" Kanye asked. She looked him in the eyes, steady and sure. "I think you already have. Now it's time to close the door behind you," she said softly. Kanye didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands. For years, they had written lyrics about chaos, rebellion, power, but today they were still, quiet, ready. He stood up slowly, as if waking from a long dream. The woman stayed seated. She didn't try to hold him or ask where he was going. She just smiled like she already knew. As he walked out of the church that day, there were no cameras, no noise, just the sun finally breaking through the clouds, and a quiet inside his chest that felt more sacred than any stage. That conversation with the old woman didn't make the headlines. There were no viral videos, no trending hashtags, no platinum records born from that pew. But something eternal shifted that morning in the back row of a modest church in South Central. Kanye West didn't become a different man overnight. He still wrestled with pride, still had verses that hit too hard, still had nights when silence felt like a stranger. But he stopped pretending the darkness was light. He stopped calling the stage a sanctuary. In a world where fame comes faster than faith and noise drowns out every whisper of the soul, Kanye found himself in a space with no beats, no bars, just breath, just grace. And maybe that's where healing really begins. Not with a spotlight, but with surrender. Not with another album, but with a man finally willing to be quiet long enough to hear God say, "I never left you." And for the first time in decades, Kanye didn't need to answer back. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.